Welcome to Mastering Life's Adventures, an educational podcast about tapping into your true self, the soul, the substance of your life, to discover what life's ups and downs are really about, and how to have a greater sense of purpose, peace, joy, and fulfillment. I am Dr. Judith Holder, your host, coach, psychologist, fellow seeker who enjoys diving into the connections between spirituality, psychology, wellness, and your everyday life's adventures. All preparing and polishing you like the facets of a magnificent diamond to be your best self. If you're craving more from your life, you are in the right place. Come, let's journey together and transforming what you know into who you really are. Mastering Life's Adventures begins now.
Hi, I'm back. And this is now after the 100th episode that I did, talking about the wonderful guests and the wonderful episodes that I did have of looking at soul evolution from an individual perspective as well as from a guest perspective. And now I have a delightful guest on, and Colleen will share a little bit about herself. And then we're dive right into talking about what she has noticed, because she's actually a core member of our group that I attend on a weekly basis. And we give inspirational support to each other, and we help to vet the different things. And I thought she'd be a great person to have this dialogue with. So Colleen, do you want to introduce yourself, and then we can take it away?
Well, thanks, Judith. I didn't think about introducing myself. So let's see. Yeah, I get to be involved with Judith every week. I get to experience your wisdom and your kindness and your insight every week, and I really appreciate that. So I'm a coach. Right now I'm in an observation mode and appreciating that group and gleaning wisdom from everybody. Yeah, and I'm just appreciating everything that I am learning in life right now and looking back and seeing what I can use moving forward and creating a new me at the moment.
Well, let me just get the seekers and the listeners kind of a view in. Colleen's an exceptionally good coach. She has great questions. She does executive and career coaching, and she has been in the field for a good period of time, giving her wisdom in consultation. So I don't want that to, go past people.
Thank you, Judith. That's kind.
Tell me, how do you want to begin this conversation? I mean, is there a question you want to ask me or something you think that the viewers would be interested in?
This is interesting. So to share, because I do believe my suggestion to you was that you should interview yourself about this and all of the great ideas and things and what your thoughts were on how this all came about and changed. Somehow I found myself in the hot seat, which I'm happy to do because it's been so wonderful to be a part of and witness and all of that. There's been so much learning for me, and to watch you go through this has been just amazing. But of course, I totally lost your question. So tell me again, what was your question?
Yeah, was there a question? Well, you actually alluded to the question and something we had talked about as well is, how do I get this going? How did this begin? I'm more than willing to share that again, because it was just not necessarily something I had in the forefront of my mind to do a podcast on Mastering Life's Adventures. And it wasn't really that something came across my email that said that you too can do a podcast. And so that got me interested in, I could do that. But then after I went through the training of what it would entail, which was about 6 hours of helping me understand the podcast and having people talk about their podcast and everything of that nature, piqued my interest to say, if I could do something that would make a difference, that could contribute to the greater good of individuals listening to it, or attract individuals who had never thought about their soul. And so over in a kind of a process, I came up with the title of my podcast, and I worked with this particular group, was one of the sponsors of the training. And I said, let me work with you and see if I can be able to pull something together. And the person I worked with was really a delightful person. He was very innovative, very creative, similar to you, Colleen, in many regards. And asked some interesting questions and got me start thinking about my why. Why would I want to do a podcast? because one of the things they said on average, podcasts, die out after, 12 or 20 sessions, episodes, or whatever it may be. And so he says it's important for you to know your why and for other individuals to know what your why is. And so that, started me thinking about, if I'm going to do this, why would I want to do it? And what is it that I'm bringing to the table that could be of value to other individuals? And so some of that came from his questioning of me. And that actually, I launched through that process, and then doing an intro and an outro and looking for music and having to think about what are show notes, which was a new area for me. And then also having to pass the why is like, okay, what else do I want to do? And that's where my love for spirituality, applied spirituality came in. Part of that love was, I think we live our lives so on the surface, and it's a greater meaning. And that's why I put it as my tagline, being your best self through soul evolution, because I think that's really, which is the substance of your life. That's the key to why we're here or why we're doing what we're doing and some of the experiences that we're going through. So that's a little bit about how I initially, started to think about it and started to move forward with just putting my toe in the water and see, is this pond something I can swim in, or if it's something that's deeper than I think it is?
Well, I have tons of questions for you, but what questions do you have for me?
What's your first impression in listening to the episodes?
Boy, can I go all the way back to the very first one?
It might be hard because it's been out since September of 2022.
I know, and there's been over 100 now, Judith. I don't know if I can go back to, I just have been wowed by all of them. Obviously, some hit closer to home than others. I think whether it's a new topic or new information or something I already know, that you are so kind and thoughtful in everything you share, whether it's I feel it towards me or towards your guests. And even if it's like something you don't agree with, or it's different than your approach, you are so open-minded to a discussion to learn something new for you or the people who are listening, that it is just so refreshing. So it's interesting because what was it? I think I was listening to a part of one of your most recent ones. You referenced COVID and just how much it impacted and just the seclusion for people and the impact to people. And it's like, just what's happened in the last few years, just that piece alone, as I say that out loud to myself, that's so refreshing in the climate we live in today, the way you make people feel. And I think for me, as I was thinking this morning, reminiscing and listening to some new ones this morning, if I were to think about what do I get, or especially when I think about these last few years of my life, and I've been through a lot of not so fun stuff, I realize you've really helped me accept what is, let go of what was. It helped me not necessarily let go of what was, but also remember who I was, and then also move forward with who I am. Because with everything I have been through, I sort of forgot who I was. And so it really helped me remember who I was before stuff happened, or even before the conditioning happened, if that makes sense. So it's been so many tools and so much information that has really helped me connect to myself, to really connect to a God that I didn't even know who God was. Like I knew there was a God before I knew who it was, because no one taught that to me. And so it reminded me of all the things I knew before I knew what I knew, if that makes sense.
Isn't that really quite interesting? Because there's an innate part of us that does know, a lot, but then it gets covered over through all the experiences and all the stuff that happens to us. So it's like a rediscovering that aspect of ourselves in order for us to kind of be more of who we truly are. But and that's what our soul wants.
Yeah.
Our soul wants us to kind of say, look at me. And I'm trying to move past all this other stuff, but this is the real McCoy here.
Yeah. So you really helped me give myself permission to go back to that place, and gave me some of the words to put to those experiences that I didn't have.
Yeah. And that ultimately one of the goals of doing the podcast and the different episodes was just that, help people connect to something that is already innately within them. And they just have to discover it because we are so much focused externally on the life events that happen to us and what's expected of us and what we have to make sure we're doing as opposed to being. And that's the quest of the soul is just like, how do you balance that and knowing that they're like lessons that we're all learning. Sometimes we do better than others in our learning of it. But one thing's for sure is that they'll repeat themselves again and again until we get it. And then it says, okay, you got it. Great. But I don't think it means that God stops giving us lessons. So just because we got that one lesson, he lumps us up to the next level for that lesson.
Well, I'm hoping that level has some easier lessons.
Yeah. So that's one of my ultimate desires is that people walk away with understanding something more or something different about themselves, about the people that are around them. It just makes them food for thought, I guess is the word I would use.
Yeah. Worked on me.
Well, that is good to hear and good to know. And thanks for sharing that. But you said you had a lot of questions too.
Well, I'm curious because there's one thing that popped into my head. And because I get to experience you like every week almost. I mean, I, of course, don't know everything about you, Judith, but I have a high regard for you. You seem to zero in on a lot of topics that I need help with, that I wouldn't necessarily see you as needing help on with those topics. So I find it curious that you can zero in. Now, the answer could just be simple prayer that you get an answer from above. But if it's not that answer, how do you get all of your topics?
Well, that's a great question. And some of it is literally, praying about what do I think. And also I have a psychology background. So, and I've seen clients and a coaching background. I've seen clients and I've been able to see some of the common themes that come up in those sessions, that I'm having with individuals. And I live life and I have a family, in terms of, brothers and sisters and so forth. And so I start to just meditate on that. Mm-hmm. And then also I think about what I see going on in the world, many different ways and directions that information they come to me to say, I want to do something on that topic. I mean, for this past year in January, I said, okay, let me write down and brainstorm all the different topics I could write. So I did, for this past year, I said, let me do this in a different way, more systematic. And so I came up with my list of topic areas that I want to do. I don't necessarily always follow them because other things come up and say, no, I want to do this instead. That's fine. But I felt like I need to have a little bit of a semi-structure. So I brainstorm with myself. I do pray about what the topic may be. And sometimes just information starts to flow to say, you need to do something on this. For example, with the Barriers and Roadblock series that I did last year. Yeah. Well, it was very clear to me I need to do something on criticism because it happens a lot. We criticize ourselves. We criticize other individuals. We're just very, very critical. And we have this gremlin, that seems to stay on our shoulder. And it's like, okay, now how does that impact the soul? Being critical of ourselves so much. Being wise about understanding certain situations and making shifts and changes. That's different than being critical. And so through that process, I start thinking about what does, criticism mean? What does judgment mean? What is, what I call, in that particular episode, CCJ, criticism, condemnation, and judgment. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because we're always kind of some of it is inculcated through society and socialization that happens to us that we're doing it. But again, what impact does it have on the soul? And so that's when I start meditating, thinking about the soul, thinking about the energetic energy that comes with criticism, condemnation, and judgment. And then thinking about how, like sometimes a visual comes out before me like a stone on a blossoming flower or rose, that is crushing it. That's what criticism is crushing subtly or more overtly. It can start off as a pebble and move into a bigger rock, and we don't think about it that way, but we don't realize that that's a weight that's on our soul. And what do we do about it? How do we be aware of it when it's happening? Because it can have come from our family background that we've had, people, parents and loved ones, our aunts, uncles who are very critical. And so we pick it up that way as a child. Or it could come through social groups and gatherings that we're in. That there's a lot of CCJ taking place there. So it can come up in different avenues and different ways. And then, I think about it from my own spiritual upbringing, what that last piece of its impact upon the soul, and start to percolate on it. I literally just percolate and think about and start to jot down some ideas and some thoughts about it, what the soul can be able to do. And that's an episode people want to go back and listen to. They certainly can. I don't necessarily remember the number of the episode, but it's under criticism, condemnation, judgment, roadblocks and barriers. Because I think there are, as you're asking the question, I think there are key situations that happen, emotional states, or mental states that we engage in that distract soul and what its soul needs in order to be nourished and to continue to grow. So that was a long-winded answer to be your question.
No, it's good though, because I've been through a lot of that.
A lot of people have.
Yeah, and it's even as I heard you say that, it's like, oh, and sometimes like you think you're the only one going through it, which I kind of wish that were the case, because it makes me sad to think that so many people might feel the same way. Unfortunately, that's true though.
So, but you're hitting another point too. So the topics that I try to bring up are topics that resonate with a lot of people. And there may be some topics that don't resonate with a lot of people because, for example, this year I did a series on children, on spiritually gifted children and teens. But not everyone has children, so that may not resonate with them. But I felt like it was a vital topic to do because our children have been bombarded by so much. And the parents want more guidance about how do I do this? How do I, in the midst of all that's going on, how can I raise spiritually gifted children? And that's why I have guests that come on and talk about on that. And as I look at it through the soul evolution, and they're looking at it through their expertise.
I don't think I heard all of those. I remember because that guest wrote some books on it, right?
Correct. One of the guests that I had come on, she wrote books on spiritually gifted children. She has like 42 books.
I think she did a couple of episodes. I know I listened to at least one of those episodes because I remember looking up some of the books.
She did two, not on this series of children, but she came on initially just to talk about how she evolved into moving to writing the books. And she also talked in the about some of the kind of a particular way she likes to orient people to understanding their children and the gifts that they do have. And then I said, wouldn't it be nice for you to come on and just do a series of 4, on different areas that we can figure out that would be interesting to seekers and listeners, of my podcast. And so that's where this year we did that series.
Yeah. And I may have listened to the first one too and not realize that it was the same person, but I did remember listening to some of the ones on the books. Let's see. What questions do you have?
The other thing that I think that people are looking for is something I did with one of my guests is how do you balance out being a people pleaser with being, a good person? Oh, and so that guest really talked about her experience about getting really frustrated with being a people pleaser. She's helping everyone else but herself. And so that was a good conversation because, again, that's an area that I think we all have experienced and have done this because we want people to enjoy, appreciate who we are. And we don't realize we may get over our skis, as one person shared, over our skis with giving too and tilted forward to help others, not being aware that we need to lean a little bit back and be more centered and also be aware of ourselves and also our soul and what our soul is needing in this process, because there is a difference between serving others and giving of oneself to others than people pleasing. And the motive is because I want them to like me. Right. Whereas the servant is, I'm doing it because it needs to be done.
Right. Yeah. I'm definitely guilty of that.
We all have some guilt to that and some degree. You're just learning how to evolve from that and be aware of it.
Yeah. That's one I've worked on quite a bit. And learning to love myself, that's been a whole new concept. Didn't even realize that was a thing for the majority of my life. Yeah, so that's self-care, caretaker.
So it's not that you're not loving, you were loving others, but you weren't being aware of loving oneself
Right.
and what that would mean for you and your growth and your advancement of who you want to be.
Right.
I don't think you're alone in that. I think there's a lot of lack of understanding, misunderstanding, not understanding. And it can go into different avenues of
Right.
what love is.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of self-sacrifice, I think. Yeah. So learning.
Yeah. I mean, we do self-sacrificing, and this is, we'll get your thought about this, Colleen. We do self-sacrificing in order to make sure other people are being taken care of and they're doing well, and that's a part of loving. But I think what is sometimes we lose sight of the fact of something you said, how much do I love who I am? How much do I appreciate who I am? Because sometimes we're raised with the sense of you're not supposed to love yourself. You're supposed to just give to other people. You know,
Right.
that's what is it said? What Jesus said, when you love others as you would love yourself. Loving others as you would love yourself means you got to know how to love yourself. And I think that's the journey we're on. I mean, I think of all the grander scheme of things,
Yeah.
is we're on a journey of the different nuances of love and what that looks like.
Yeah, I think that's a big reflection of the whole world right now. You know, it's interesting because I was listening to a little bit on the worthiness one this morning. Let's see, how was it? The feeling not good enough. That was the newest one. A little bit of a couple of them. And the self-confidence one. So I was kind of like doing a whole bunch of the newer ones this morning, and the whole worthiness there, I've got some other stuff on that. And, you know, I'm out there looking at what's the definition of worthiness. And, you know, they give me this paragraph and how you have to, like, you know, but your title is really it. I deserve goodness, period. It's really that simple. And then I think you say it, and I've heard it elsewhere, like simply because God made me.
Yes.
And it's like, the first time I heard that, it was like, wait a minute, that's really the only thing. And when I heard that, it was like, thankfully before today, but not too long ago, unfortunately. But it's like, it's people, well, I shouldn't say that. Maybe I'm the only one who didn't know that one. Unfortunately, that's probably not true, but it's like, so busy fighting for that worthiness for so many years and for so long. And it's like, it's so sad. And the interesting thing is, never for the majority of my life would I apply that same definition to anyone else.
What happens for you that you can do it for others, not apply to yourself, that you're worthy?
That's a really good question. I'm not exactly sure how to answer that. What I know is that was the definition I took from my parents, my father specifically. I knew that it was not okay. So I took from him and said, yeah, that's not okay. I will not give that to my children.
This part of unworthiness you're talking about?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I didn't know how to reverse it for myself, because I think the pain of what I was getting from that, like I couldn't correct it for myself in that childhood situation, I could reflect it correctly back on my children, which I don't know how I did that, but I did. Yeah, but now I have to teach it to myself.
Yeah, but when you were able to do it for your children, you're actually teaching at some level to your soul.
Yes.
Your soul, in that givingness, it probably felt like it was the right thing to do to your children. And to help them to be able to, maybe it's more of a quality of, I just need to acknowledge some of the things I said, did, and how I was, and embrace that more in doing it to myself or with myself.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you're exactly right, and I think that's the process I'm going through right now. And I think, well, this is interesting because I think a lot of what I've had to do in the last couple of years is to be able to hold the polarity of two opposites in my life at the same time. So what maybe wasn't right or good at the moment, along with what is right and good, and see them both at the same time. So how could I, a relationship that wasn't right and good, but I could not make that one right. And of course, he's no longer here anymore, so I can't change what was. So, and as a child, it was what it was.
But you're bringing up something I think many people, are struggling with, that polarity of kind of over here that wasn't quite fitting or wasn't quite right. And what it had memories that have kind of lodged in with the polarity of what is right, what is worthy, what is my creator. And I think it's a common, it's like the scales up and down and up and down. And you're like, okay, maybe I no longer need to have scales. And instead, I just need to be.
Yes.
And getting okay and clearing out some of the other stuff that lends you to believe that you're not worthy, good, honorable, acceptable, because God doesn't just look at our behaviors. He looks at, he made us. Yes, there are behaviors and actions and thoughts and deeds that we may have to correct and make some changes in it, but it doesn't take away from the fact that God loves us.
Right. And I that's where I'm at now. But like looking back, it's just been a journey to get there. It's like, wow.
Yeah, you're getting there because at some level, your soul has awakened to a greater aware about there's some discernment I can make. I use that word sometimes. There's a discernment that you can be able to make, and a discernment that you can be able to say, that's old. Polarity over here is old. Definitely. I see it coming out, rearing its head. And now I can say, no, I'm not going there. I'm going to move into a different way of wholeness and being that feels more right for me, because you have some of that in you automatically by the mere fact that you raised your children a different way.
Right. I still look at it and wonder, how did I do this when that polarity of those, there's a mismatch there in a lot of ways.
Welcome to the human condition. We have a lot of mismatches, that happen for us. And there's some things, and that's why, I talk about this gold that exists within us, the GOLD, the gold that exists within us, and being aware of the fact that that's what we want to tap into and hold on to, because all this other stuff is fake. It's fake gold, and being aware that sometimes, and I think when you said earlier about, taking that observation time is similar to what I talk about in the podcast about taking still time.
Oh, yes. I do remember that. Yes.
Which is, allowing you to, really tap into love and light, on slowing things down enough to be able to just be. So there's kind of this inner wisdom that you have, Colleen, that you've done this naturally, for yourself over time. And God doesn't necessarily think about detours that we're making. It looks at, are you learning? Are you growing? Are you advancing?
In God's time, evidently.
God's time is totally different from our time.
I know. And God is much more patient than I am. I'm learning that. Breathing through it. Yes. I'm going to have to go back and listen to the still time one and tell me the gold. Because I remember hearing that, but remind me of the gold.
Well, gold was really focused on that there are these gems that exist within you. And those are the things that you want to tie into and you want to hold on to, as opposed to kind of a false sense of self or a false sense of the trueness of who you are. So I know I had, with each some of these, statements that I made, I try to think of it in terms of what it ties into, like the G and the O and the L and the D. And that's not coming to me right now where it ties into it. But it does tie into that. The gold in its essence is the substance of your life, which is your soul.
Yeah. Because I remember there's so many. I don't know how you would remember them all. But with it still, and I remember the gold. I just can't remember. I can't remember it again. And that's the other thing. You have so many. One, you have great acronyms. You have great visuals and analogies. You always have such good, relatable analogies. So like people can always relate to what you're saying, something that connects them in their own life. There's another thing I wanted to share with you because I think what was it in, which one it was in this, I think it was it was a self-confidence one. Something she said in there, I think it was something you said about gifts, completely reminded me of some things. One of the things in my coaching program, I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, But the number one thing I care about in my coaching is that people walk away feeling good about who they are. Like that's the number one essence. And people will always like, oh, Colleen, that's just not good enough. And it reminded me that prior to all the stuff that's happened in my life, I had part of a church I went to, I forgot the name of it, but you do a class where they tell you your spiritual gifts. And my number one spiritual gift was gift of encouragement.
Oh, wow.
And I remembered that as you were talking about it in that episode about self-confidence. And I was like, that's probably right where that came from.
Oh, wow.
So that was a really, really nice connection for me. Yeah.
And that's one of the things that it's good to hear, because sometimes when we hear something and it resonates with us, it connects us with something else that we need to kind of pull up, because we have so much stuff, that we have as I call it records of, like a library.
Right. Yes.
So only when you hear something, you realize, oh, that ties into that. That's why that happened there. Right. This went on over here. Oh, okay. Can I use any of this, or can I not use some of it? Yeah, it's a good one. And that's one of the things I'm going to champion. But you're also bringing up another point too, is sometimes I do think are acronyms or analogies or whatever, but once I do the podcast, I moved on from it. Because so I sometimes have to go back and say, okay, like I had another analogy, lens, you need to make sure you're like a lens and focus.
Oh, yeah.
And have it so that the sunlight can shine through it and kind of focus and heat that up. And I was thinking about that before, and I remember that acronym, but some acronyms I remember, some I don't, because of, just so many that I'm trying to figure out ways to explain it to people or give them a better understanding about something. So forgive me if I don't remember all of them.
No.
But the lens one was really related to light, energy, networking of awareness. And that's the awareness of actually the laws and the precepts that exist in the universe. And then the S was really source centered. Your source is your creator, your I am presence, your Atman, whatever people want to name that. But each of these are important to know that sometimes, and that was an earlier episode that I did that one around lens, was because I was trying to help people understand that you're more than just your physical being, that you're a light being, and that you're energetically, the thoughts and feelings that we do have an impact upon our energy level. If we have really down and types of thoughts, and I guess where our energy is going to go down. If we have uplifting thoughts and energy, then our energetic field goes up in this any way. So we have, as co-creators in this realm, tied into our source, our I am presence or creator, we have an ability to use the energy for positive or for negative. But God says, either way, you're going to learn something from it. And so then that's why I wanted to help people understand there are laws. There are these precepts that exist in the universe. And if we're in alignment with them, then we're more aligned with the awareness that God is going to move us down a certain pathway that is in alignment with who we really are. We're outside of those laws, then that's why we get into mishaps that's happened to us. Or sometimes because God says, you learned this lesson before, be awake. Let's see if you kind of learned it, giving it to you in a different way, because God has a right to test us any way that, she wants to test us. And so it was just another way, as I was saying, to help people get into this full awareness. There's a lens that you have that you can either help to kind of your awareness about yourself, or you can use that same lens to burn something up by the attention. Attention informs reality. The attention you put on something.
Yeah. Oh, burn something up.
Well, maybe some things need to be burned up in a more positive way, or transmuted.
Yeah.
In a positive way. Interesting. We've been talking about some of the directions that I've kind of taken things in with the podcast and some of the focuses of the podcast. And sometimes, people do ask me, well, what do you want to do for the future? And it's like, oh, no, don't ask that question. Because I don't necessarily think in that manner. I think more in now and thinking about, I feel like, the steps that I take now help to inform what the future ones are going to be. That's why I said I may make a list of things and say, this is some of the things I want to talk about. But then something comes up and I say, no, it doesn't feel right. I need to talk about this over here. So there's some fluidness to, how I go about looking, in the now and into the future and ask to be inspired with what, needs to be the next things that would be of interest to people to hear or listen to. Does that make sense?
Yes, very much.
I remember I had a person once who told me they knew what age they were going to have their children and they timed it that way. And they knew what age first get married. They knew when they're going to get married. They knew when they're going to have their children. And they knew they would have a career promotion. They timed it out. And they worked on that timetable. I said, but that's just not me. And I can't plan that.
Did it all turn out that way?
50% did, 50% didn't. I mean, it worked, I think we each have to figure out what works for us.
Right.
And do it. And this, works for me is to be more in flow.
Yeah.
And see where it leads. It not only becomes an adventure for the seekers who are listening to my podcast, it becomes an adventure for me too.
It's good to have some idea, but to be able to change it. Because you're right. Something else could come up that catches your attention more. So is there like something that pops into your head? What was the biggest surprise in everything that's happened so far? Most positive thing or your biggest learning aha moment?
And I could do the podcast.
That's not true because, and for the listeners, you said you were not a techie person before you did this, and look what you've done. So besides that.
But that has been one of the, I guess, one of the qualities I would say, or two qualities that I say that are my top strengths. One is my desire of wanting to disseminate applied spirituality, helping it applied into your everyday life. And the other is persistence. I persist until I kind of get it. I learn it. And so I think the persistence has allowed me to get to the 100th plus, episode.
Yeah.
And all the episodes, I think one of the most inspiring was in January of 2023, when one of my guests, talked about his experience with having a rare disease. And he was a basketball player in college, and he was a coach as well. And then when he got this rare disease, which was a form of cancer, he had his leg amputated, a part of his leg, and then the rest of his leg amputated. But he had such a resilience and such a desire. And even though the chemo that he went through many days of just feeling down and out, about his experience having to do, I think every other week had to do some form of chemo, that he didn't allow it to impact his spirit. And that's what I think we're all working towards is, regardless of the experiences that happen to us, how do we continue to maintain a balance of joy, and not allowing us to get down. And so that was very inspiring. He told stories and so that it was just definitely memorable, episode. And, I've had various guest stories. I'm like my podcast, as you know, so I have some individual solo episodes that I do. And then also I have the guests, which is twice a month. And then 2 to 3 times a month is when I do more of the solo episodes. And so with the guest, it's just been a pleasure having them on and hearing their perspectives about things.
Yeah.
And it's really nice for me just to sit here and then give so forth, saying, that related spiritually or soul-wise or to a gift. And then, that was really being garnered or developed or something that you just did naturally. It's good for people to hear how it does tie into your soul growth and your advancement. I've enjoyed all my guests. I've enjoyed, hearing and learning from them, as we have said, they've learned from the experience of going beyond the show or the podcast, how you want to call it, which way you want to call it. So that I just have enjoyed. I've learned a lot in the process of doing this and having the guest on it. And sometimes with that learning is also comes your willingness to say, okay, how can I continue to find other ways that I can give back? That's my ultimate goal in doing the podcast. I'm not making money from the podcast. It's more of a service that I'm giving and helping to use some of the gifts that God has given me in terms of being honored to receive a degree in psychology and also some certifications in coaching and doing consultations and doing many types of work, working in the community and whatever it may be, that I can now be able to say, I can take all that information, all those gifts, and then utilize it to the podcast, and help other people maybe grow in ways they wouldn't have grown if they didn't hear the podcast.
I remember that, gentleman. I remember how you felt about that. And I am grateful because I feel filled up today. Everybody who listens, I'm sure, is very grateful for your podcast.
Well, thank you. And, I'm grateful for you being willing to come on and for us to have this dialogue going on and talking about the podcast. We just have to wait and see the next 100 podcasts have for our listeners and seekers. Stay tuned and see. And I welcome their feedback as well at any time about an episode they would like to have something on. They can always, reach out to me and to be able to do that. Or, if they have any comments, I'm always interested in comments as well. Once again, thank you, Colleen, for coming and doing this episode with me. And our seekers, stay tuned for our future episodes. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining me for this episode on Mastering Life's Adventures, being your best self through soul evolution. If you have enjoyed what you've heard today, I would be delighted if you would share this episode with others, leave a thumbs up, and subscribe to my Mastering Life's Adventures podcast. Look forward to your joining the next episode. Please leave any comments or suggestions you might have below. Bye for now.